Hello world and all my friends and subscribers out there. So welcome to my fifth part of my painting with regular acrylic paints series, painting minis, sorry. I am going to be talking about how I make my glazes with regular acrylic paints. So I just want to take this moment before I get started just to say, in this series I am using Reeves acrylic paints. And that's only because I've been requested to try them out on minis and just to see how they work out. But you can use this method and any of the methods I've shown you in this whole series and the videos still to come. You can use this method with any acrylic paints. Some will be easier than others. I suggest that you get the best quality acrylic paints that you can afford. Liquid or fluid acrylics are probably a little bit better for painting minis. Some brands have fluid acrylics. I know Golden does and Jo Sonja's does. So yeah, it's a great way to just work with something that doesn't have to be so specific, like I've talked about in one of my first videos in this series. Anyway, let's get started. So the things I'm going to be using for this making glazes is first of all the paint, or any acrylic paint, even mini paint if you want to, the ones that are branded. So you'll need the paint that in the colour that you want the glaze to be. Then you'll need just your wash water with a bit of soft soap in it, is what I use, and a bit of medium. So I'm using Liquitex's matte medium here, and if you have a matte medium, make sure you shake the bottle, because the particles that make it matte tend to settle to the bottom, so always make sure you give it a good shake before you use it. You could also, if you don't have a matte medium, or you can use a gloss medium if you want to. You'll just have to, if you don't want it to be glossy at the end, you will have to put a matte coat over the top. But if you don't have that, you could even use a tiny bit of PVA glue. All you're needing it for really is just to keep the integrity of the paint. So what the matte medium does is it binds the paint. So when you put on this really thin layer, if you're going to thin it down quite considerably, normally that's what a glaze is. Now, as you can see here, I'm mixing up my glaze, but I've done it a bit dark, so I'm going to wipe that up and start again. So what you do is you mix in water until you get to the right transparency of glaze that you want. Well, that's how I do it anyway. And so when you've mixed that much water into your paint, it loses its integrity, so it's going to not cover as well. It'll bead up on your mini, as you can see it's doing on my plastic there, in my palette. It'll bead up on your mini, or it'll just flow into the cracks, and it won't give a smooth, even coverage. So that's what the medium's there for. It's to help put that medium that holds the paint together back into the mix, so you've diluted it down enough when you've mixed it in the water, and then you're just putting it back in. Because it's transparent, it's just going to keep that paint at a good consistency, so it's going to give even coverage. So like I said, you could use PVA glue if you wanted to. You would probably just need to make sure you sealed your mini afterwards. I haven't tried that yet, and I probably should give it a go, because just to see what it's going to do to the mini, how well it'll stick and things like that. So I might try that out for you. Okay, so I've mixed up my glaze, and I've started on the light side. I would always suggest starting on the light side, because you wouldn't want to go too dark and then it's just kind of not a glaze anymore. It's just kind of like a layer of just regular paint, because glazes are typically transparent, because what you use them for is changing the hue of the part you're painting it on. So basically, what I use it for typically is to kind of graduate as I'm doing here on fingers or tentacles or whatever, a gradual colour change, and I like to do that on my Nurgle miniatures to give them kind of like a rotten, disgusting look, like they've been dipping their fingers and things in oil or whatever. So I mean, you could do the layering technique or wet blending technique and go from the skin color to the next color, and that works, but I feel like this is a much easier option, and so this is what I would use it for. You can always also use glazes for if you want to, as in my painting gems tutorial, how I paint my gems. I use a glaze to finish off my gem to give it a good shine and give it the actual colour, because I paint the gem in black and white first and then I put the colour on top so it has a 3D effect. You could also use glazes in an instance where you want something obviously like, I don't know, slime, goo, blood, something that has a transparent quality. You could do that step last if you wanted it to be shiny. You could also do a glaze if you don't like the colour of something. So you could, if it's too red and you wanted to tone it down, you could do a brown glaze over the top, or you could do, say, a purple glaze over the top, just to give it a different tone, just to mix it up, just to give it something different. So as you can see, I'm darkening my glaze as I go. You could keep going with the thinness of glaze that you mixed up in the first place, but I tend to find that if it's too thin, it will take way too many layers. So I tend to do it in stages, and I mix a little bit of my colour into it if I'm trying to kind of make a gradation. If you were just doing a regular glaze on top, you would obviously just stick to the transparency that you had originally wanted, whereas I want this to be a gradual transition. So I'm just mixing more of my black into each time I'm applying a layer. So I'm drying my mini in between with a hairdryer so that it just gives, so that I'm not wiping the glaze off and messing it around. I like to have a dry layer in between each time. This can be a bit of a problem when you're trying to blend the two colours, and I didn't realise until my mini was dry that I had some harsh edges. Now, to fix that kind of problem when you're using glazes, or to be honest, any kind of layering technique, and I can talk about this more in my layering video, but you could, once you've put on your kind of glazing layer, if you were transitioning, and you find that you have a harsh edge, you could clean your brush off, make sure it's clean and damp, and kind of do like a stippling motion on the harsh edge, and that should diffuse it enough so that it looks like a good transition. Unfortunately, I didn't notice till the end that I had some quite harsh lines, but what are you gonna do? So I'm just going to carry on darkening up my glaze with each application, and I'm just, as you saw in the first time I darkened it, I'm just using a little bit more paint and adding it in. I'm not adding any more water or any more medium into my glaze. So the other thing I want to let you know is that with the mediums, they don't tend to want to come out of your plastic palette as easily as paint. So normally with acrylic paint, I can run it under a really hot tap, and it kind of expands the plastic medium or softens it so that it's elastic enough that I can actually scrub it off with a hard bristled paintbrush. With the medium, it doesn't do that. so it bonds really well to my plastic palette. And as you can see in some of the shots, I've got quite a methy palette, and that's why, because the medium, I've used it for my glazes and things like that, and it's stuck to my palette and it doesn't come off very easily. I still have to find a way of trying to get it off, otherwise I'm just gonna buy a new one of these. So this is my last layer. I think it's the darkest layer. It is opaque at this stage, and that's because that's what I wanted for the very tips of these tentacles. So it's kind of like the rot is at the very end, kind of like frostbite, but I know frostbite's kind of like a sudden stop. It's got a very distinct end on flesh, but I guess you could call this maybe poison or rot or something like that. Anyway, so in a moment I'll show you the end result. So I hope you found this interesting and helpful. If you're using regular acrylic paints, like I said, you can use any acrylic paints you want with these methods I'm showing you, and it'll all pretty much work the same way. So I'm going to be trying out different acrylic paints and showing you how they work on minis and which ones work the best, and I'm kind of going to be doing like a testing it out series, just to give you an idea of how other acrylic paints work and the challenges that you can have with them and things like that. So yeah, thank you so much for watching, and the next video I'm going to be doing is on layering, and yeah, I'll see you then. So thank you so much and see you later. Bye. As the ethanol is in it, like I said. And for those of you who aren't 18 or 21 or whatever, you're not old enough to get vodka, which you can also use. I've used that before. Works great, works just the same. But if you can't, if you're young and you can't get alcohol, get some non-flavored Listerine, and it works great. So as you can see, I want to cover my whole model because I do want to have him looking kind of grungy. But you can see it's flowing into all those low spots really nicely. It's not pulling up, it's not